Bill here. As promised, I'm back to talk a little bit more about some of uh, some of my 18 years with Deborah, my soon-to-be ex-wife. You know, one of the stories that Deborah likes to tell as she's gathering sympathy is about how we had a miscarriage back in 2007. We were trying to get pregnant so much for our first few years of marriage, and it was very difficult, emotional, stressful time. She often tells how she has a little baby in heaven named Jordan. She named the little baby, and how she's going to see the baby one day, and how we just how tragic it was. She gets a lot of sympathy that way, as Paul Harvey would say. Now for the rest of the story. It is true that we were trying to get pregnant from the time we got married. Deborah wanted a child more than anything. It dominated all of her conversation, her thoughts. During those years, every time someone in the church would become pregnant and announce their pregnancy, Deborah would begin treating them badly. She would act as though they were only doing it to rub her nose in it. She'd get angry and depressed. It was just unbearable, as if it was hard to rejoice with people. Uh, and because I didn't act that way, she would act as though it just wasn't important to me. But the truth is, for as long as I can remember, even when I was a teenager, I've always believed that I was supposed to be a father. I wanted to be a father more than anything. I wanted children more than anything I could imagine, really, all my life. And so I wanted to get pregnant just as bad as she did. But it didn't allow that to affect the way that I related to others or the way that I rejoiced for others and the things that they did. So as we continued to try to get pregnant, and the years began to go by, it was a year and then more, um, I can honestly say I can't tell you how difficult it was. Um, Not only going through this, but listening to the insults and the attacks. Constantly, she would attack me. It was my fault. She was sure. There were 100 reasons. Maybe there was something wrong with me. I needed to get checked. Maybe I didn't have enough interest. Maybe I didn't have enough faith. I wasn't faithful enough. Maybe I didn't love her enough and wasn't showing that enough. And so God was withholding, and on and on. She attacked me in more ways than all, and saying things that I won't repeat here. Even I have some limits. But this went on for years until finally we went to a specialist and we found that there was a problem. Deborah's fallopian tubes were irreparably scarred on the inside, and it wasn't possible for her to, I guess, drop the eggs or whatever happens there. It just wasn't possible. And I remember in that moment, I remember I could have thrown back at her some of what she'd been throwing at me for years, but I was gracious as she came in with tears. I was gracious. I took her hand as she cried and wept, and I assured her that even if I had known that, I would have still married you. And I assured her of my love and my compassion. And so we kept trying to get pregnant. We went to an in vitro fertilization specialist. And this specialist, they gave injections over a period of time. It was quite a long process of preparing her body to produce enough eggs, etc. And then they take the eggs and they take the semen and they put them together in a laboratory dish, and they try to form embryos and then put them back in the uterus. And then it takes a period of time for those embryos, if it's successful, to attach to the wall. Well, we went through all of that process, and I'll never forget the Friday that we went to the specialist to have. There was one embryo, one single embryo that had lived through this process of fertilization and was ready to be implanted into Deborah's body. And so we went there on a Friday, and they implanted the embryo into her body. And they gave her these instructions. They said, you must take it easy. You've got to take it very easy over the next few days. Treat yourself almost as if you were on bed rest. Of course, you can walk around, you can do the things you normally do, but no heavy lifting, no, active sports, no stress, nothing stressful, nothing that's going to jar or shake your body. This embryo has to attach itself to the uterus wall over these days, and if anything goes wrong, if it doesn't, it will die, and the pregnancy won't work. And so we went home with that. That was a Friday night. Friday night, folks. Friday, almost 7 o'clock at night or so when we got back home from this process. On Saturday mornings, I usually like to sleep in. Debra always gets up early. And so I slept in the next day, and she got up early and went to our community center, our church, where she saw our youth leader then, a young man named Corey, an at-risk youth himself who had, at that time at least, gotten his life together. And he was a true leader among the youth back then. They would follow him like the Pied Piper. Wherever he went, you'd see 7 or 8, 9 kids following him. And that was Saturday. Now, we had our youth group every Saturday night, but this was Saturday early in the day. He was off. He was off duty. He wasn't working. He wasn't at work. He wasn't scheduled to be at work till 6 o'clock that night. But about 10 o'clock in the morning, she ran into him at the center. And he had come up there with, 7 or 8 other boys who had planned all week to come up there on a Saturday to use the sound equipment to make some Christian rap songs. It was a leisurely thing that they wanted to do. Saturday morning was one of the only times when they could get in there and have access to the equipment to make it. Oh, Shaquan and DeMonte, and I don't remember the names of all the boys that were there. I remember those 2 were there that day, a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old. And they came to make Christian rap songs at 10 o'clock in the morning on his day off. And Debra saw them, and it infuriated her somehow that they weren't working. One thing about her was whenever she saw young people being idle, having fun, it just irritated her. She thought they should be being productive or doing work. I guess that's what her family did all the time. That's how they valued one another, was by the work they output. Now, I'm all for work and a strong work ethic, and that's how I got everything I have. I believe in that. I also believe in having fun and letting people be people. And as an employer, when someone's off work, they're off work. They can do whatever they want. Well, anyway, Debra saw Corey and these 7 or 8 kids. And I promise you, I'm telling this story exactly as it occurred. I'm telling it gospel. She said, "Why aren't you doing something productive, Corey? We can put up Christmas lights on this building. This building needs Christmas lights on it, this big 3-story, 60,000 square foot building." And she said, "Why don't you guys get some ladders and we can start putting those up right now?" And Corey said, "I'm sorry, but we've already had this planned all week. All week, this is what the boys want to do." And she began to demand and to insist that, "No, I'm telling you, I want you to do this. Get some ladders. We're going to put up Christmas lights on the outside of the building." And when he refused, she called me up at 10 o'clock in the morning, woke me up. I was still asleep. I remember waking up to her shouting in the phone, literally shouting, that I needed to get up here and get these lazy, no good deadbeats to get to work right now. That this youth pastor that we've got, this youth leader, was useless and lazy and refused to do anything. What she didn't realize is, first, it wasn't in my power to do that. He was off duty. It wasn't within my power to force him to do anything. The reason people respect me is because I treat them fairly. Fairly. Not a pushover, but you have to be fair. Second, it certainly wasn't in my power to make even one of those kids do anything. These are at-risk kids in the hood, living in, it was an absolute miracle that they wanted to be in a church on a Saturday morning instead of with some of the gangs that were trying to recruit them. And to try to force them to get on a ladder and put up Christmas lights, why, any one of them or all of them would most likely have just said, "You know what, we'll just go back home. This isn't what we came here for." People like that, most people aren't going to let someone push them around like that, but she absolutely insisted. I tried to reason with her, saying, "Debra, I'm not even capable of making them do what you want, but they're here. at the church. We're able to share the gospel with them, for crying out loud. For crying out loud, let the Christmas lights alone. We'll influence them over time. You change people through influence, not control. And as I began to try to reason with her over the telephone, she began to shout all the more. She began to shout about these bastards, these no good bastards. And she said, you are the worst one, because you enable them. You let them do anything they want. You're not raising men. You're raising faggots and bastards. These boys have vaginas instead of balls. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be offensive. These are the exact words that she shouted at me over the phone as I was still lying in bed. She said, fine, I'll do it myself. And she hung up. And of course, I got up and I rushed to the community center, and not knowing what kind of terror she would inflict. And she dragged a 16-foot ladder out of the building herself and threw it up against the side of the building, and climbed up the ladder and was trying to put these Christmas lights up herself so that she could show everyone she could make her point. I was livid and demanded that she get down off that ladder right then. To be honest with you, I wasn't kind with my words. And she finally got down off the ladder, and somehow I got her to go to the house and tried to calm her for the rest of the weekend. But when Monday came and we went back to the doctor, of course the embryo had died. Of course it didn't attach to her wall. As she didn't follow any of the advice, but went exactly to the opposite extreme. I'd hear her tell the story so often about how we'd lost our baby. We'd had a miscarriage. Folks, that wasn't a miscarriage, that was an abortion. She killed that baby just as surely as if she had aborted it. There is no difference in my mind. She wanted to try again, and when I wouldn't, she, to this day, swears that it was just that I didn't want babies bad enough. I didn't want children badly enough. I guess I didn't want children badly enough to risk killing another one like that because of her poor attitude, her abusive attitude. Folks, the worst part about this entire story is that was December of 2007. Almost 14 years ago. And to this very day and moment, if you should ask her, she would tell you that to this very day, she believes that the reason we lost that baby was because those deadbeat boys were too lazy to get up and put some Christmas lights up. She believes that to this day, that the reason that happened was because I was too weak, too impotent to force them to do what any real man should have done. She sees no fault in herself, no fault in her actions. She did what she had to do because of the terrible things that we were all doing. She had to get on that ladder. She had to act like that because they were so horrible and so lazy, and I was such an enabler. She believes that to this day. She's always said that. She's never wavered, never apologized, never acknowledged any wrongdoing whatsoever. And the way she acted that day, folks, the words out of her mouth, that forceful attitude, that's her. That's the way she always was. The only thing that makes this story so much different than any other day in our 18-year history, the only thing that makes her attitude so much worse or my memory so much more traumatic is that this particular time there was a living embryo, living what would have been child, a baby in her womb. And she cared more about her selfish, abusive attitude than the life of that child or the future that we could have had. That's Debra. God bless you. Again, I've forgiven. I'm not living in bitterness or anger. It may sound that way as I recount it. I can't recount these things without feeling emotion. And I am disgusted. I'm disgusted not only by her course of conduct, but by the fact that she still believes she was right. But I have forgiven it. I've turned it over to the Lord. I still rejoice in Jesus, and I still look for good. God bless you. Hello, folks. Hey, I wanted to add one addition to the video that you've just seen. When Deborah went up that ladder, none of the boys knew. Corey, none of the boys knew that we were trying to get pregnant, that there was such a thing as in vitro fertilization, that she had an embryo in her body. No one else knew. No one in the world knew that we were trying to use that method to get pregnant, or that there was any risk at all to her outside the ordinary. Only she and I knew, and she did know. And as I said before, she still to this very day believes that she was not at fault. Well, thank you. God bless.